Hey everybody, it's Pandy and I'm playing World of Tanks. Thought about doing the IS-7, but I had some technical issues related to the video editing and the files and all that good stuff. Some files got corrupted, that's what happened. So I wanted to do the T-54 since I already have footage of it and it's good to go, or the footage was kind of good to go. I had to do my magic to it, but it's good to go. My intermediate tank bias couldn't really stop me from wanting to do the T-54 because of the disaster that beheld me yesterday. I have little to no shame telling you guys that this tank is very, very sexy. So sexy that I'm going to go ahead and do this whole voice commentary naked. Yeah, naked. Yeah. Anyways, this video is going to be about the T-54 main battle tank. Development of the T-54 first started sometime in October of 1944 at Stalin Euro Tank Factory, number 183. Due to drawbacks on the T-44 due to its small turret, it remained incapable of mounting a 100mm main gun. And what was desired was the 100mm main gun. Initially, the design was completed in December, and the first prototype was completed in February of 1945. And basically, the T-54's hull is the same as the T-44, minus a few differences, minus the thicker armor and also a newly designed driver's hatch, which was actually, I think, larger. The turret ring was increased to allow for a larger turret, which in turn allowed for thicker armor and a larger gun. The main gun on the prototype was the 100mm D10 TK cannon. Unlike the T-44, the external fuel tanks were also connected to the fuel system, which allowed for larger ranges and less downtime during combat operations. It was decided to go ahead and modernize the tank before production even started. Another T-54 prototype was built in July of 1945 to equip with a new turret and armed with a 100mm main gun. This new turret had 200mm worth of armor, 20mm more than the prototype. Also, its fuel capacity was increased, and it was even a better improved tank than the prototype itself, or the very first prototype. It went into trials in July of 1945 till November of the same year, with some corrections and alterations being made during that time. The vehicle finally entered official service in April 29th of 1946, and production started in 1947. Production started on the initial series of tanks was slow. 1,500 modifications were made during the initial production, with the 100mm main gun in all respects was slightly modified. In testing, it showed that this 100mm main gun had slightly worse penetration than what was fired from the Tiger II, but slightly better than what was on the Tiger I. The very first production model was the T-54-1. It began to show problems in relations to quality when production was finally starting to ramp up. Production was stopped, and a more improved T-54-2 version was starting to be designed and developed. A brand new turret was fitted, a more dome-shaped turret inspired by the IS-3, fitted and installed. Other improvements were like the new transmission system and wider tracks was thrown in, and production finally started back up in 1949. More modernizations were included in 1951, but they were more related to the telescope gunner sights, smoke generating system, and better radio systems. In 1943, a new gun was chosen to be mounted on any future T-54s. This gun was going to be the 100mm D10T. There was also going to be a newer vertical stabilizer thrown in there, and also a newly designed muzzle counterweight. The T-54 also received night vision equipment for the driver, a snorkel, newer telescopic sights, infrared driver periscope, and an IR headlight. Also a brand new radio, multi-stage engine air filters, radiator controls to improve engine performance, and electrical oil pumps, automatic fire extinguisher, and more fuel tanks. This upgrade later became the T-54A. A is an Able. Tank production on this one started in 1945. Later upgrades to the T-54 included a newer D10 100mm main guns, a lunar infrared searchlight, and infrared gun sights. During nuclear testing, it was shown that the T-54 can survive a 2 to 15 kiloton nuclear charge at a range of 300 meters from its epicenter. Holy shit, that's gotta be hot. Well, it was a problem. It was especially hot, and also it was found that the shockwave would have killed the crew at that range, unless they were 700 meters away or a half mile from the epicenter. At this point in 1945, nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons system protection was offered into the system, and that was thrown into production, and it was more for protecting the crew members against nuclear explosions and particles as that would be created by the explosion. With newer NBC protections, a newer engine was thrown in to provide greater engine power and easier access during maintenance and repairs. Ammunition loads for the main gun from its initial design was increased to 45 rounds instead of 34. They were stored in what was considered a wet container near the fuel tanks. The tank also received better vision devices, mainly in infrared and night vision, better plane gun stabilization, and to balance the weight of the new equipment, the armor on the rear was slightly thinned. With all these upgrades, like the NBC protection engine and pretty much everything else, the new designation for this tank was the T-55. The T-55 and the T-54 all in itself was basically the same tank, just a bunch of different upgrades and modernizations and what have you. For the purpose of this video, we're going to consider everything the T-54, 55. Now, the T-54-55 killed any further development of any Soviet heavy tank designs and was favored over the IS-3 in all respects of firepower, mobility, and armor protection. The T-54-55 continued to be upgraded, retrofitted, and modernized up to this day. Advancements in night vision, explosive reactive armor, newer main guns like the 120, 125mm main guns, active protection systems, fire control systems with range finding, and thermal sights has made the T-54-55 a mainstay in many third world countries that have low-end budgets, very capable of defending themselves if the need arises. Unless, the United States or, Russia or some European country attacks you, then you're fucked. Now, the T-54-55 was produced by the Soviet Union, Poland, and Czechoslovakia between 1946 to 1981. For the total estimated number of tanks produced, 86,000 to 100,000 built. This is not including any variances built by like China or Egypt or Iraq. The T-54-55 was the most common tank in Soviet inventory into the mid-70s. Along with the T-62, it comprised at least 85% of the Soviet Army's tank inventory in the mid-70s. The T-54-55 seen service in the invasion of Hungary in 1956, where some of them were knocked out by Molotov cocktails and anti-tank guns. The Hungarians even delivered one captured T-54A to the British Embassy in Budapest, and to the surprise of analysts, they found that the T-54A outclassed any of their armored fighting vehicles at the time. This basically spurred the development and production of the M60 Patton and other armored fighting vehicles in NATO in the 70s. The T-54-55 is basically in reserve status within the Russian armed forces, as active duty units mainly use the T-80 and the T-72, and with smaller numbers of T-90s in the Far East military districts. Now, in the 6 Days War in 1957 showed that Americans supplied M48 Patton tanks, Saturnians, and even upgraded Sherman tanks were capable of facing off against the T-54-55s. Combined with superior planning, operation control, and superior air power, proved to be more than capable in dealing with the T-54-55s. Now, in 1973, during the Tom Kepler War, the T-54-55's main gun started losing its competitive edge against the 105 main guns mounted on the M60 Patton. During the Vietnam War, the North Vietnamese Army also used T-54s against the South Vietnamese Army, United States forces. In 1971, 17 M41 light tanks managed to ambush an MVA armored force at Lam Sum 719, destroying 22 MVA tanks, 6 of them being T-54s. In April of 1972, some M46 Pattons armed with the 90mm main guns ambushed a large MVA tank column from a high ground and managed to destroy 2 T-54s before they withdrew. A week later, 17 more in grand total were destroyed. A couple of weeks later, these Pattons were forced to withdraw in the factor that they were being outflanked. On April 30th, 1975, a number of T-54s crashed through the gates of the South Vietnamese presidential palace, signaling the end of the war. Now, the T-54 was also used in the Cambodian Civil War and other African conflicts of interest. T-54-55 was also used during the Polish martial law in the 80s. The T-54 also saw combat action in Anglodia and also the Yugoslavian wars. A mix of Type 69s and T-54-55s were used during the Iran-Iraqi War, Operation Desert Storm, and Operation Iraqi Freedom. Ethiopia also used this tank during its conflict with the Islamic Courts Union in Somalia. The Sri Lankan Army used the T-54-55 during the Civil War against the Tasman Tigers. I'm probably jacking all the names up, but fuck it, I'm doing it. The model that the Tasman Tigers also had happened to be produced in Czechoslovakia, and it was destroyed by the Sri Lankan Army. The T-54 also saw combat on both sides during the most recent Libyan civil war. You guys probably seen images of that on YouTube. If you haven't, well, you'll be able to find them quite easily because there's plenty of it out there. Now, the T-54-55 has been used worldwide by as many as 50 countries and subject to very, very different changes, improvements throughout its production histories or upgrades. Many of them are still in service today with advanced armored packages and technologies like computerized fire control and also all kinds of other little gadgets like GPS. And where the tanks, the version that we happen to be dealing with was it's basically a T-54A with a late model T-62 100mm D-54 main gun. Yeah, weird, they're using a gun from the 70s. Now, the nice thing about the T-54's 100mm main gun is it's the fastest loading, but it has the lowest amount of damage and accuracy for any of the Tier 9 medium tank main guns. Now, to say the least, none of the Tier 9 medium tank guns have any advantage over each other. I mean, you do notice differences in like accuracy and damage and penetration, but there isn't really much of a huge difference, and they all get the job done. You can target all tanks minus some Tier 10s and the Tier 9 German heavies. Most of them you just have to get around their sides and rears to be able to effectively penetrate their armor. I'm still talking about the Tier 10s. When it comes to being one of the biggest tanks on the board, the quicker loading times does help you when you're facing off against Tier 6 and 7s, able to put out enough DPS out there to be rendered extremely effective. Now, the T-54 does have the best overall frontal armor. The dome-shaped turret and low profile makes it very effective when individuals are firing at you from long range, especially when you're in a hull down type position. The rear of the tank is kind of vulnerable to fire, especially because it has less armor. It has a weaker rear armor compared to the rest of them, even compared to the paper-thin Patton tank. The Patton tank actually has thicker rear armor than the T-54 does. This opens the tank up to attacks even to Tier 5 tanks with pea shooters, so your best bet is to keep your frontal to the front and basically keep your ass protected from being raped. In some respects, it has the best frontal armor of any of the Tier 9s, and it actually has better armor than some of the Tier 8 heavy tanks out there. It's really good armor. Now, the mobility on the T-54 is the best compared to the rest of the Tier 9 medium tanks. Has the best turning rate of any of them and also the second best top speed. Combine all this together makes it beast for that ring of death around heavy tanks. There's already been a many of times that I've did this ring around enemy tanks, and whoa, it makes for interesting times. You take names, shoot bubblegum, and forget where your bubblegum is. You can get that frontal facing enemies fairly easily, and it helps you escape the grips of death when attacked. My only real problem with the mobility is when you turn in one place, you end up going a little bit forward, just a tad bit. It's not really a problem, but that's the only problem I can find, and if I can't find no problems, it should be alright, right? Overall, the T-54 is a well-rounded and balanced medium tank just like the E-50. The E-50 is more heavy tank than it is actual medium tank, where the T-54 you can't deny the medium tankism. You saw what I just did there? I made a religion. Tankism. This is truly the first tank that homes in the concept of the main battle tank concept, and simply put, it just kind of every turn and everything it just does just ahs and oohs me or something. Just something. It's the bomb. What else can I say? Now I get to that part of the video where I just get to give some gold away to you fine folks. I'll be giving away another $20 Ultimate Game card provided by Playspan. It's worth 2,000 points on their website. It's good on the North American, European, or Russian servers. To win said card, you must be A, be subscribed to my channel, and B, post a comment or a video response down below, maybe about the question of the video, which is, which medium tank is the sexiest? I gotta throw my opinion out there in the depths of the internet. It's gotta be the E-50. It's just too much tank for me to handle. Too sexy for my turret. And that's about it. Enough with the tankism. So, you guys take it easy. I'm Pandy, and good hunting.